Hello, my tiny hat and I, which is from Paper Chase, isn't it cute? Would like to welcome you to Vlogmas Day 2. This is my November wrap-up. So the purpose of November reading for me was to slow things down a little bit. I read a lot in October and I needed to slow things down because I was not retaining any information that was in the books I was reading. I was struggling to just stop and slow down. I was just kind of churning through books really fast, so I needed to kind of forcibly make myself slow down. So that is what I did in November. Still managed to read 8 books, which I think is still more than I thought I would read, and some of them were off my TBR, so as in like away from my TBR, not off. That's a confusing sentence. Thank you, English language. Basically, I read all the books on my TBR, I completed my fictionary TBR, and then I read some books that were not on my TBR. So I'm gonna start throwing these books at myself and giving you my super speedy thoughts on what I thought of them. So the first book I read within November was Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This was just brilliant. I absolutely loved it. TJ Klune has such a brilliantly whimsical way of telling stories that are both beautiful and very real. He creates worlds in which there are big redemption arcs, and it's all about the fact that the life you've lived up until this point doesn't have to be the life you continue to live, and you can redeem yourself and you can change and you can become a better person. And I love that that is the message throughout these books. This one follows 2 characters, one of whom has died and is kind of in his limbo transition period in which he spends that time at this tea shop where he basically stays until he is ready to move on, and it's about his relationship with the people that work at the tea shop and his journey of looking back on his life and realising the kind of person that he really was. And I just thought it was beautiful. I loved it very, very much, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Then I went on to another banger of a book. This is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This follows Amari, who is a young girl whose brother has invited her to become part of this supernatural bureau, and she joins up to the supernatural bureau where she can see this part of the world that she never knew even existed because her brother's actually gone missing from working there. So she wants to find out what's happened to him and get to the bottom of all of that. So this is an incredibly creative novel about these children who are at this bureau. They can all see the supernatural world that no one else can see, that isn't within this kind of community of people, and they all have these enhanced abilities to be able to help them work within this world. And it was just so brilliantly creative. I loved it so much. This is the first in a series and I cannot wait for the second one. I'm so excited to see where we go with Amari next and what skills she learns and how she learns about her own abilities. It's just gonna be great. This really left me off to a really good start for the month because obviously I'd already rated Under the Whispering Door 5 stars, and then this also came in as 5 stars, so it was a good start to the month. Then I read The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This was the book that my patrons picked for me to read and make a dedicated reading vlog for. So there is a reading vlog if you did want to see that. It is available to the Lothlorien tiers onwards, and it's all linked down below. This one I thought was really good fun. It follows a baby up until being a 15, 16-year-old, and the baby's family have all been killed, and the baby has managed to get themselves to a graveyard in which they become part of this graveyard and raised by the ghosts, and there is still someone after them that initially killed their family, so it's that kind of threat there as well as them growing up among ghosts. As expected with Neil Gaiman, this is ridiculously creative and just fun and bizarre. Neil Gaiman just has such a way of crafting such ingenious situations and scenarios, and I just think he's such a brilliant writer. I think this is probably one of my favourites of him. I preferred this to Coraline, actually. I just felt like I got on with it a little bit better. I thought it was perfect time for you to read it as well because it was just coming out at the end of October, so just off the edge of the spooky season, and I just thought it was really good fun. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Perfectly Preventable Deaths by Deirdre Sullivan, and I'm actually gonna package deal this because I also read Precious Catastrophe immediately after, and these are a duology, so I feel like it's better to talk about them together because I read them back to back, so they just kind of blur in my mind anyway. These are witchy books about 2 sisters who move to a new town, and one of the sisters discovers that she has this witch magic about her. The other sister is falling in love with a guy who's actually pretty dangerous, so it's down to the other sister to try and save her sister. I've said sister a lot of times. Basically, it's sisterly bonds, it's witchy, it's magic, it's dark. There's a lot of amazing things written in this book series. I've interviewed Deirdre Sullivan recently on Hotkey Books' Instagram, so if you want to see that, head over to their Instagram, and I think it's saved to their IGTV. But I just really enjoyed how dark and raw these books felt. They felt different to other YA I've read of this category, I would say. And talking to Deirdre Sullivan about the folklore and the stories she's involved into these books, made them all the more interesting for me. So I really enjoyed these, and I gave these both 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and wow, I loved this book. This is very similar to The Secret History in that we have a group of students who are really focused around a certain topic. In this case, it is Shakespeare and theatre studies, and they are all very close-knit. There's a real passionate energy around them, and then something goes wrong and disrupts that group entirely, and it is about them covering this up and how they go on and how they heal from what's happened. There is so much passion on every page. It's such a homage to Shakespeare anyway throughout the acts within this book. They are each kind of pertaining to certain plays and talking about the plays that are being performed in this book by the students as well. But this is just altogether a big Shakespeare tragedy, and I just thought it was so good. There is so much passion, as I've said, but there's also a lot of sexual tension within this book that I thought worked really well. So I loved this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think this is probably one that will sit within favourite books of the year in my head, if not of all time. I just thought it was fantastic. One of the things the author did really well as well is her beautiful descriptions of the settings without it feeling daunting. You didn't feel like you were stuck in paragraphs and paragraphs of description and establishing, but you just felt like you got a touch for what it was like and the atmosphere, and that was done in such a brilliant way, in my opinion. Then I finally read Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I did it. I finally read this book. I have been meaning to read this since I got my first paperback copy of it in 2016, I think it was. I don't know how it's taken me this long to read this book, but I really enjoyed it. This is the final book in the 6 of Crows duology. It follows the same characters from the first book, and I can't really tell you too much more of what it's about if you've not read the first one. I don't want to spoil it for you, but we follow them as they go on another dangerous mission, basically, and I just thought it was really good. I love the high stakes in these books. I love the characters. I love the dynamics of them. I enjoy morally grey characters, and they're all pretty morally grey, I would say. I just really enjoyed them. I particularly like Jesper. I think he is probably my favourite character, and I just want more from them. So I can finally watch the TV show now. I know that it didn't necessarily follow the 6 of Crows books as much as it did the Shadow and Bone series, but I wanted to wait just because I didn't want any of the images in my head for those characters. So now I can finally watch it, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And finally, my last book of the month was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This was my Patreon book club pick, and I got it in just under the wire. I finished it on the last day of the month, and it disappointed me. This is a story about a girl called Alex who is at Yale University, and she can see greys, which are ghosts, and there has been a murder and she is trying to get to the bottom of it with the help / involvement of these greys, and that's kind of the special ability that she has that stands her out from the other students within this weird fantasy world we're set into. So there seems to be like these societies that study fantasy related things, and then there's all the normal students that I assume have no idea that this is all going on. I honestly found this a little hard to follow. I felt like the start of it was a lot of establishing and a lot of information, granted in a lot of pages, but it still felt like it wasn't really laid out very clearly for me, I personally felt, and I think potentially it might not have been the right time for me to be reading this book. I think I wanted something lighter, whereas this is heavier. This book comes with a lot of trigger warnings, so do check those out if you are looking to read it. I did expect it to be darker and more shocking, I would say, from what people had said about it in advance, and honestly it had like 2 moments that I thought were slightly darker, one of them that did surprise me and I did have to read it again, but I didn't feel like it was all that shocking, and I just felt like it overall maybe was trying too hard to be something and wasn't necessarily giving me the plot route until over halfway through, which I found frustrating to read about. But yeah, it was okay. I know this is obviously a story about our main character's trauma and her healing from that as well, and it's a trauma that we as the reader don't know too much about, so it also deals with that kind of thing as well. But yeah, it fell a bit flat for me, unfortunately, and I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars, so I think this was my lowest rated of the month. So that was my November wrap up. As I said, I read 8 books in November, and I think it was a fairly decent mix. To be honest, it was pretty good of a month. I mostly read 4 to 5 star books. I do review all my books through Corepile, which is created by G from Book Roast, if you did want to check that out, and that kind of helps me get my ratings so that I'm giving each part of the book a rating out of 10, and then it generates a rating out of 5. So I do feel like it's a fairly good way of me reviewing books and getting the actual rating out there, so I feel like the 4 and 5 stars have stuff behind them to bulk that out. So yeah, genuinely was just a really good reading month and not just me rating ridiculously generously, I think. So thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you're enjoying Vlogmas so far. If you did enjoy, please do give this video a thumbs up, comment down below what you read in November, and subscribe to see more of my face on your feed. You can also find my Patreon link down below with extra bonus content, including my Christmas party for my patrons coming up in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling, stay positive, and Merry Christmas.